My storm room key flashed red while 14 cartons with my son's name sat on my safety shelf behind the locked door. Why had Darren disabled my key? And why would one truthful report frighten him so much? Then I looked at the drill sheet and saw that Amos Bell had not checked in. I stopped arguing. "Lena, come with me," I said. It was 6:03 on a Tuesday evening, 3 minutes into Redbud Court's monthly drill. Through the narrow, wired glass window, I could see Darren Pike written across the boxes in thick black marker. Behind me, 20 adults waited along the covered walkway. My son stood at my shoulder and told Priya Knoll, our drill coordinator, that I must have lost my key. I had not lost it. The green fob was in my hand. Darren had ordered its replacement himself, and before that evening was over, he would ask me to call the failure a misunderstanding. I asked Priya to use Redbud's temporary entry plan for everyone waiting, then crossed the courtyard toward Amos's porch. Darren called after me that I was making a rehearsal dramatic. I kept walking. A person who has spent 32 years in a school office learns that the loudest problem is not always the first one to solve. Amos was 71, lived alone, and treated every scheduled event as if punctuality were a moral virtue. He was the man who arrived 10 minutes early to a potluck with his empty casserole dish because he had forgotten the casserole. His missing checkmark did not mean disaster, but it meant I was going to look. Lena Ortiz knocked while I called his name through the screen. After a moment, Amos answered from the back room, one shoe on and one in his hand. The drill notice had slipped beneath a grocery circular. He was embarrassed enough to start explaining before we asked. "No speech," I told him. "Bring the other shoe." Lena laughed, and the three of us followed the route printed on the little cream card Redbud had given every resident when the storm room opened. Active household fobs opened the room during drills. Marked shelves stayed clear. If Priya had to override a door while a household helper was signed in, the storage bay assigned to that household could be reviewed. I had read those lines aloud at orientation more times than Darren had attended. By the time we returned, Priya had opened the door with the coordinator fob. She checked my fob number against her tablet and frowned. "This one was deactivated yesterday," she said. "A replacement was requested." Everyone was inside except Darren, who stood beside the roster with his jaw set. He had signed himself in as my household helper. "Your mother's here," Priya said. "I need to log why her fob failed." Darren glanced at the row of residents, then at me. "Just put down misunderstanding." "What was misunderstood?" I asked. "The key situation." "Which situation?" His eyes moved toward the wired window. 14 boxes filled the shelf marked Pike E. 2 extended far enough into the aisle that Priya had already pushed them back. "We can discuss it privately," he said. "We can," I answered, "after Priya records what happened." That was the moment the second question settled in me. Darren was not merely embarrassed that his boxes had been seen, he was protecting something. I knew he rented Redbud's optional resale bay behind the laundry house, but I did not yet know what my failed fob had to do with it. Priya wrote, "Temporary coordinator override," on the drill sheet. She did not accuse Darren, and neither did I. The tablet had already made the access change plain. Darren reached for the pen. "See? That's what I meant." "Requested by whom?" I asked. Priya looked at me before answering. "The household helper on the account." The drill ended at 6:17. No one cheered because Redbud was not that kind of place. People collected purses and light jackets and went back to the ordinary business of Tuesday. Amos thanked Lena 3 times. She told him one thank you was enough and offered to help him pin the next notice above his coffee maker. Priya asked me to remain at the office counter. Darren said he would join us. I told him I wanted 5 minutes without him first. He gave me the wounded expression he had used since childhood whenever fairness failed to favor him. At 9, it had appeared, when his sister received the larger half of a sandwich after he had eaten the first one. At 42, the face had acquired better shoes and a truck payment, but the message was unchanged. A loving mother would save him the discomfort of being measured. The office occupied one end of the laundry porch. Priya turned her tablet so I could see the account without handing it to me. My green fob showed inactive. A replacement had been issued to Darren the previous afternoon. Could he do that? I asked. With the helper permission you gave him? Yes. I had granted that permission 18 months earlier, after my husband Walter died. Grief had turned ordinary chores into rooms without light switches. Darren had helped me move the electric account, replace a leaking faucet, and remember which envelope belonged at the office. When Priya asked whether I wanted a household helper listed, I had said yes with gratitude. Gratitude is clean when it remembers what was given. Mine had slowly become a debt Darren renewed whenever I tried to do something myself. Was my fob reported broken? I asked. Lost? I set the green piece of plastic on the counter. It had been on my ring the entire time. Priya's voice softened. I can log your request for direct control. Because a current helper holds the replacement, both account holders receive notice before we change the designation at the resident meeting. I don't want a hearing about my family. It isn't one. The meeting can decide account access and redbud privileges, nothing else. That distinction mattered. I did not want Darren threatened with his home. I did not want a punishment assembled from every bad feeling I had swallowed since Walter's funeral. I wanted my own key to open a shared door. I wanted my shelf clear. I wanted the permission I had given in trust returned to me. When I stepped outside, Darren was leaning against the railing. You went into the account without me, he said. It is my account. Ours, technically. Not after the meeting. For a second, his face emptied. Then he smiled as if I had made a harmless mistake. Mom, you don't need to turn a glitch into a crusade. You reported my key lost. I was replacing it. You sent the replacement to yourself, so I could make sure you had it when you needed it. I looked through the storm room window at his boxes. And when would that be? He did not answer. He said he would come by after dinner, then walked toward the parking lot with the replacement fob in his pocket. That night I sat at my kitchen table and tried to remember when help had become supervision. The change had not arrived with a slammed door or a cruel sentence. It had come in useful little packages. Darren began picking up my mail because he was already passing the box. He answered Priya's questions because he understood the portal. He told Beth that Mom gets overwhelmed by details, though details had been my living for 3 decades. My daughter Beth lived across town and loved peace the way some people love polished furniture. She wanted it shining even if no one could sit comfortably on it. She called after Darren spoke to her. He says the key was being updated. He reported it lost. Maybe he clicked the wrong thing. Then he can click the right thing by Friday. Beth went quiet. Do you want me to talk to him? No, I want him to talk to me. Wednesday afternoon, the sky darkened early. Redbud's alert sounded at 3:42. It was not the drill, and nobody treated it as one. Doors opened along the walkway. Neighbors took the routes Priya had assigned us, and I reached for the same green fob that had failed the night before. I stepped onto the walkway and saw Lena helping Amos with his jacket. Priya was already at the common room door. My fob was still inactive. Darren's truck came into the lot fast enough to scatter gravel. He jumped out with the replacement fob in his hand. I've got you, he called. Those 3 words used to comfort me. That afternoon they sounded like a lock. Priya has the temporary plan, I said. There's no reason to make this public. Come in with me. He held the fob above the reader but did not touch it until I moved beside him. Through the window I could see his cartons narrowing the shelf aisle. Priya arrived before I answered and opened the door with the coordinator override already logged from Tuesday. People entered in the order she called them. Lena stayed with Amos. I went in behind them. No miracle occurred, and no storm delivered justice. The warning merely made the choice Darren had already made impossible to dismiss as a technical inconvenience. Inside, he leaned close. If she reports an override with me signed as helper, they can review my storage bay. There it was. That is what you wanted me to protect. It's inventory, Mom. I need that space. Then why are 14 boxes on my shelf? Because the bay is full, temporarily. Why did you disable my fob? Not here. He glanced around, but no one was listening. Amos was telling Lena he had brought both shoes this time. Priya was checking the aisle. Darren's fear was not of public humiliation. It was of a truthful sequence. Full bay, overflow cartons, disabled fob, dependent mother. The warning passed. Residents began to leave. Priya marked that the temporary override had been used and that the shelf obstruction had been witnessed. She did not mention suspension. She did not need to. The little cream rule card had said enough the night before. Amos remained on the bench while the room cleared. His hands shook slightly as he retied one shoe. He apologized for being slow. Lena crouched beside him, not to tie it for him, but to hold the loose lace away from the wet floor while he made the knot. You came when called, I told him. That is all tonight required. Darren heard me. See? Everybody got in. Because Priya used an override, which proves there was a backup. A backup is not permission to remove the first way in. He sighed toward the ceiling, inviting everyone to witness how unreasonable I had become. Priya stacked clipboards. Lena helped Amos stand. Nobody accepted the invitation. Outside, rain struck the awning hard enough to interrupt us. Darren jingled the replacement fob in his palm. Put it in my hand, I said. For half a second I thought he would. His fingers closed around it instead. Not until the account is sorted out. You mean the storage? I mean all of it. He had said the fob existed for my protection. Yet during the warning that supposedly justified his concern, he withheld it to preserve leverage. The contradiction needed no witness or recording. It changed what I knew. On the walk back, Lena stayed half a step behind Amos so he could choose his pace. Darren drove the short distance to my building. When I arrived, he was dry beneath my porch light and irritated that I had taken so long. You could have ridden with me. You left before asking. Again came the wounded face. In Darren's version of help, the offer existed even when he never made it, and my failure to receive it became ingratitude. Inside, I hung my damp jacket over a chair. He reached to move it to the bathroom hook. I told him to leave it. You're going to turn everything into a test now, he said. No, I am going to notice when you move what belongs to me. That was when we finally sat down to speak about the cartons. Darren followed me home. He stood in my kitchen with the replacement fob in his pocket and refused the chair I offered him. I sat. Restraint is not the absence of anger. Sometimes it is choosing a chair because standing would make you pace, and pacing would let the other person call your movement hysteria. Tell me the whole thing, I said. He rubbed a hand over his hair. The resale business grew faster than I expected. Darren bought returned household goods in small lots and sold them online. He was neither rich nor ruined. He was a man with more optimism than floor space. 3 months earlier, Redbud had offered several optional storage bays to residents for seasonal projects. He accepted one and agreed to the conditions on the cream card. The bay filled. Then his hall closet filled. He began putting boxes on my storm room shelf after he started helping with supper setup. When I asked why the shelf seemed crowded, he told me Priya was reorganizing supplies. You lied to me. I simplified it. You used my shelf. You never put anything there except a tote. You disabled my access. I made it shared. That sentence hurt more than the others. Shared access sounds generous until one person keeps the only working key. Clear the shelf, I said. Return the replacement. Correct the lost fob request by Friday. And then what? You let the committee take the bay? I tell the truth about what happened. What they do with the bay is their decision. He stared at me. After everything I did when Dad died? Everything you did was help because I consented to it. It does not purchase control now. Beth was right. You're making this about independence. It is about a door. You could enter with me any time. That is not my own access. He took the replacement fob out, rolled it between his fingers, and put it back in his pocket. Then he left. The silence after him had the shape of all the things I had allowed because each seemed too small to oppose. The first winter after Walter died, Darren began calling every morning. At first I waited for those calls. Then, if I did not answer by the third ring, he called Beth. If I said I had been in the shower, he said a person living alone should keep a phone within reach. Soon he asked where I planned to go before I went there. He did not order me to stay home. He simply turned every ordinary decision into something I had to defend. Walter had understood the difference between helping and taking over. He could be maddeningly slow while I learned a new appliance, but he kept his hands in his pockets until I asked. Darren moved quickly. Speed looked like competence when I was tired. By the time I noticed that he answered questions addressed to me, everyone else had learned to look at him first. The storm room supper was one example. For years, Walter and I had carried in chairs together. After he died, Darren said I should not lift them. The next year, he said people brought too much food. Then he called the supper clutter. There had been no complaint, but I let the tradition disappear because challenging him would have required me to explain why a pot of soup mattered. That evening, I opened the drawer where I kept Redbud papers. My original helper form was beneath the laundry schedule. The permission line was ordinary. Household assistance requested by resident. Requested by resident. Not awarded to family. Not permanent because of grief. I did not need the form as evidence. I needed the reminder. Beth called again. She said Darren was frightened about the inventory and asked whether I understood how much he had tied up in it. I told her I understood that every carton belonged to him and none belonged on my shelf. She said a buyer had canceled. I said pressure explained urgency, not permission. You sound cold, she told me. I am trying to be exact. He thinks you want him punished. I want him to correct what he did. And if he won't, I looked at the green fob on my table. Then he is choosing what follows. Beth did not like that answer. Neither did I. It would have been easier to believe consequences came from whoever announced them. Then I could blame Priya, the committee, or myself, but the chain had begun before any meeting. Darren filled the bay, used my shelf, disabled my fob, and kept the replacement. I could not shorten that chain to make him feel less responsible for its end. On Thursday morning, I met Priya at the resident committee table. Lena came because she was one of the rotating adult stewards, not because I needed a witness to my feelings. I asked exactly what could happen. Priya showed me the paragraph Darren had accepted. Redbud could restore a resident's direct fob, remove helper authority at that resident's request, require marked shelves to be cleared, and suspend an optional bay for the season after a documented override and unresolved obstruction. Redbud could not decide whether Darren loved me. It would not decide where he could live. It would not fine him, seize his property, or settle old family grievances. My shoulders loosened. You look relieved, Lena said. I was afraid a small request might start a machine I couldn't stop. This machine is 3 folding tables and Priya's tablet. Priya smiled. 4 tables when attendance is good. That laugh helped because it returned the matter to its proper size. Darren's choice was serious, but it was not a courtroom drama. The committee had one narrow authority. I had three narrow requests. "What if he fixes everything at the meeting?" I asked. "Then the committee considers that," Priya said. Lena waited until we were outside. "And what if he fixes it only because people are watching?" "I'll still take my own fob." "What about him being your helper?" I looked across the courtyard at the storm room door. "That ends either way." Friday afternoon, Beth asked me to meet her at the grocery store. Darren was beside her car when I arrived. For one hopeful second, I thought he had chosen the quiet correction I offered. He held up a silver key. "This is for my apartment. If you ever need the storm room and I'm not around, you can go in and get the fob." "So my key would be inside your locked apartment. You would have a key." "To ask your home for permission to enter my common room," Beth exhaled. "Mom, he's trying. He is offering a longer route to the same control." Darren opened his truck bed. 4 cartons were inside. "I moved these. I'll keep one side of your shelf clear." "My shelf is not half yours." His voice sharpened. "You don't use it. That is not consent." A shopping cart rattled loose in the wind and struck the curb. Beth chased it, grateful for an errand. Darren lowered his voice. "The Bay Review could set me back months. Then correct the request and clear the shelf. Tell Priya the key failed because you were confused." "No." One sentence, a false one. Beth returned with the cart. I told her gently, "I love you, but I won't have you carry messages between us. Darren knows the choice." She looked from him to me. This time she did not say, "Keep the peace." She pushed the cart into the rack and said she needed to go. Friday evening passed. Darren corrected nothing. I slept badly and woke before 5. At 6, I wrote 2 columns on a grocery envelope. In the first, I listed what Darren had done after Walter died. Repaired the faucet, carried donation boxes, drove me to the county fair when I was not ready to drive there alone, sat through the first anniversary without trying to improve it. In the second, I listed what I was asking now. Return a key, clear a shelf, correct a false report. The first column was longer. That did not cancel the second. At 9, Beth came by. She found the envelope beside my cup. "Are you keeping score?" "I'm making sure gratitude hasn't made me dishonest." She read both columns. "He really was there for you." "Yes." "And now you're removing him." "From an account, not from history." Beth pressed her lips together. "After Dad died, Darren told me you were forgetting things." I waited. "Nothing dangerous. He said you missed a bill and left groceries in the trunk." I remembered both days. The bill was Walter's final clinic invoice, already paid before the joint account closed. The groceries had remained in the trunk for 12 minutes while I cried because I had bought Walter's cereal by habit. "Did you believe him?" "I believed you were grieving." "That is not the same as being incapable." "I know that now." She looked toward my paper drawer. "He made helping sound like a permanent assignment." Her realization gave me no triumph. It meant Darren had managed the family's picture of me as well as the account. Still, I did not ask her to speak at the meeting. I did not need a character trial, and I did not want my daughter rewarded for changing sides. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "Come if you wish. Listen, do not translate either of us." "He'll say the committee doesn't understand family." "The committee understands its door." That afternoon I walked the courtyard alone. The common room looked almost gentle in daylight. Beige siding, one small window, a metal awning. Nobody would imagine a family could fracture around its door. But families rarely fracture around the object itself. The object reveals whose choices count. When I found Amos and Lena on her porch, Amos apologized again for missing the drill. His shame was becoming another burden Darren's choice had placed on someone else. If you had checked in first, I said, my fob still would have failed. You did not cause my son to disable it. Amos stared at his sandal. My daughter called every evening after my wife died. After a while, she called the office if I was 10 minutes late. We argued. She stopped. Are you sorry? That we argued, yes. That she stopped calling the office? No. Lena came through the screen with iced tea. 2 things can be true before lunch, she said. After lunch, I only guarantee 1. Her humor kept our talk from becoming a lesson. We were 3 adults on a porch, each carrying histories that did not need solving that afternoon. When Lena asked what I wanted after the meeting, I first said my key. She waited. I said my shelf. She waited again. Only then did I remember the supper. Until that moment, I had imagined recovery only as the absence of Darren's control. Her question made me picture the presence of something else. Saturday morning was the shelf-clearing window Priya had placed on the notice. I arrived at 9. Darren came at 9:20 with a hand truck and the expression of a man performing generosity under protest. Priya opened the room. 4 spaces showed where he had removed boxes. 10 remained. I'll get the rest after next week's shipment moves, he said. The deadline is now, Priya replied. He pointed at the clear half of the shelf. My mother has room. Priya did not answer for me. Darren slid a form across the folding table. The resolved line was checked. Sign this, Mom. It says the temporary obstruction is cleared. It isn't. It's functionally cleared. 10 boxes are still there. Those aren't in your way. They are on my shelf. His restraint broke before mine did. I turned off the old fob because if you came in alone and saw the overflow, you would make exactly this kind of issue. I was going to bring you whenever you needed to come. You were never unsafe. The room went very quiet. He had answered the first question. It had not been a mistaken click or clumsy protection. He had disabled my independent entry so I would see only what he chose to show me. I won't sign, I said. He pushed the hand truck so hard its metal plate struck the floor. Priya asked him to lower his voice. He looked at the 10 cartons, then at me, and left them all. That afternoon, the resident meeting notice slid beneath every adult resident's door. I carried mine to Lena's porch. Amos was there repairing the loose strap on his sandal. He saw my face and immediately apologized again for missing the drill. This is not because you missed a notice, I told him. If you hadn't come to check, I would still have had a disabled fob. Darren would still have filled my shelf. You did not cause either thing. He nodded, though guilt does not leave simply because someone gives it directions. Lena poured iced tea. What do you want after the meeting? I had spent days naming what I wanted from Darren. Her question was different. Years earlier, before Walter died, Redbud residents held a simple supper in the common room at the start of each storm season. Adults brought folding chairs, soup, bread, or nothing. We updated the check-in list and complained about the laundry machines. After Darren became my helper, he began doing setup because he said it was easier. Then he called the supper clutter. The next year it did not happen. I want the supper back, I said. Good, Lena answered, but I am not making soup. Amos lifted his sandal. I can make soup. You forgot a casserole inside your own apartment. That was one time. It was February. For the first time since Tuesday, I laughed without effort. At home, I wrote my requests on an index card. 1. My own working fob. 2. My marked shelf cleared. 3. Darren removed as household helper. I did not write take his bay. That consequence belonged to the rule he had accepted, and the committee authorized to apply it. The meeting was Monday at 7. 4 folding tables formed a square. Priya sat with 2 resident committee members. Lena and Amos took chairs along the wall. Beth came, but sat near the door. Darren arrived last and placed the replacement fob on the table in front of him. Priya summarized the sequence without decoration. Drill failure, helper signed in, temporary override, replacement request, occupied shelf, correction window, 10 cartons remaining. Hearing it aloud made the story sound smaller than my hurt and larger than Darren's excuse. He spoke first. Family assistance can look different from the outside, he said. My mother asked me to manage practical things after my father passed. I have done that faithfully. The fob replacement was part of that responsibility. Did she report the fob lost? Priya asked. I understood that it needed replacing. Did you tell her before requesting it? Not specifically. Did you give her the replacement? He touched the fob. I'm offering it now. I could have made a speech about every time he had called control convenience. I could have described Walter's death and the way grief had left me grateful for any hand on my shoulder. None of that was needed to decide the door. I read my 3 requests. Darren leaned toward me. I will give you this fob if I remain the helper. There are account notices you don't understand, and I can't be responsible if you remove me and miss something. There are sentences that reveal more than confessions. He was offering to return what was mine only if he retained the power that let him take it. Priya asked, will you restore your mother's independent access now, correct the lost fob request, and clear the remaining cartons? I will give her access, he said, provided my storage is left alone. That was not the question. It's the practical solution. Priya looked at me. Ms. Pike, do you accept access under that condition? My son's hand rested beside the fob. Beth stared at the floor. Amos's sandal squeaked when he shifted his foot. No, I said. I want a fob issued directly to me, and I withdraw his helper authority. Darren's face changed. Not rage, hurt. That was harder to withstand. So you choose strangers over your son? I choose direct access over access through you. The committee paused for 6 minutes. Nobody whispered. When they returned, Priya read the decision. A new fob would be issued directly to me. Darren's helper authority would end that evening. The 10 cartons had to be moved from the marked shelf by 10 the next morning. Because the drill override had been logged while Darren was signed in, because the shelf obstruction remained after the correction window, and because he had declined immediate independent access, his optional resale bay was suspended for the season under the rule printed when he accepted it. No surprise witness entered. No hidden document appeared. The weather had not punished him. The committee applied the small rule we had read before any of us knew it would matter. Darren placed the replacement fob on the table. There, he said. She has it. Priya did not pick it up. That fob is retired with the helper account. Evelyn receives a new one in her own name. That detail mattered. I did not want control handed back as a favor from the person who had taken it. I wanted the ordinary arrangement every other adult resident had. Darren stood. You'll regret making family business public. I offered you Friday, I said. He left. Beth remained by the door, crying silently. I went to her, but I did not apologize for the decision. I don't know how to be between you, she said. Then don't be. The next morning, Darren arrived at 8:15 with his hand truck. Priya disabled the optional bay access while he stood beside her. The little reader changed from green to amber. That was the visible size of the consequence. Not eviction, not ruin, not revenge. A convenience connected to his misuse was gone for one season. He moved the 10 cartons from my shelf first. Then he opened the bay and began carrying out the rest of his inventory. Beth arrived in work gloves. I thought she had come to persuade me to store some. Instead, she asked Darren, apartment or truck? Apartment. She lifted a box. When 6 cartons remained, Darren turned to me. 1 week. Put these on your spare room wall for 1 week. The request was so familiar that my hands nearly rose on their own. No, I said, you have space. You do too. It is less convenient. Beth held the box and waited. Darren looked at her. She said no, Beth told him. They carried all 6 to his apartment. At 9:48, my shelf was clear. At 9:56, Priya handed me a new green fob in a plain paper sleeve. I pressed it to the storm room reader. The light turned green and the door released. I opened it once. I looked at the empty marked shelf and the clear aisle. Then I closed the door and went home. I wish I could say relief arrived without grief. It did not. That afternoon I kept thinking of Darren at 10, bringing me dandelions in a paper cup. I remembered him at 26, driving through sleet when Walter's car would not start. A person can have been generous and still become controlling. A boundary does not require you to erase the generous years. It requires you to stop using them as a reason to surrender the present. 2 weeks later, we held the storm room supper. Lena brought bread because she had maintained her refusal to make soup. Amos made vegetable soup and remembered the pot. Priya brought blank copies of the check-in list. I almost assigned Darren's old setup tasks to myself, then stopped. "Who wants chairs?" I asked. 3 hands rose. "Who wants the list?" Amos took it. He volunteered to make the first check-in call at the next drill. That mattered to him. Missing one notice had made him feel like a burden. Taking one ordinary role reminded him he belonged to the plan rather than being managed by it. I brought napkins. That was all. Halfway through supper, my phone lit with a message from Darren. We should put this behind us. There was no mention of the fob, the false report, the boxes, or the condition he had placed on my access. I read it once and put the phone face down. Lena did not ask who had written. She passed me the bread. 7 weeks after the meeting, Beth came to my apartment with 2 coffees. She had stopped bringing Darren's explanations, and I had stopped asking for news that would tempt her to resume. "I'm having the holiday meal," she said. "He'll be there. I want you there too." "Not this year." "Are you saying never?" "No. I'm saying I will not enter a room where everyone pretends the problem was a key malfunction. If Darren wants contact, he can speak to me directly. He can name what he did. He cannot manage any account of mine." Beth turned her cup between her palms. "What if he can't do that yet?" "Then we are not ready yet." She nodded. There was sadness in it, but no argument. Before leaving, she asked if I wanted her to remind Darren of my condition. "No," I said. "He heard it at the meeting." That answer freed her more than it freed me. She was no longer the hallway through which we sent locked messages. Months passed. Darren sent a birthday card signed only with his name. At Christmas, he sent a longer note about family being too important for grudges. Neither message named his choice. I did not tear them up. I placed them in a drawer and continued my day. No contact piece is not dramatic. It looks like buying one coffee instead of waiting for a second person. It looks like changing a light bulb without imagining who will accuse you of risking a chair. It looks like hearing a truck in the lot and not checking the curtain. At Redbud, the monthly drills continued. My fob worked each time. The marked shelves stayed clear. The committee did not discuss Darren again. His bay remained suspended for the season, exactly as decided, and his cartons remained in his own apartment or truck. No new punishment appeared. The supper became a regular tradition. Not every month and never elaborate. Adults came when they could. Sometimes there was soup. Once there were only crackers, cheese, and Lena's store-bought cookies. We updated the list and divided the small tasks so no one person became essential. 6 months after the night my fob flashed red, I stood outside the common room with my own green key in my hand. The season had turned warm again. Amos approached carrying the first folding chair. Lena followed with bread and reminded everyone without being asked that she still did not make soup. I had received another card from Darren that morning. It said he hoped time had helped me see things differently. I had read it, placed it in the drawer, and gone to buy napkins. I still loved my son. I still missed the version of us in which help had not become authority. Missing that version did not require me to reopen the same door. I pressed my fob to the reader. The light turned green. The door opened because my access belonged to me. I stepped aside, and Amos carried in the first chair.